Next speaker, Willie MacDonald. Willie is originally from Oban. He was employed in care services since 2003, and he has worked with people with dementia for the last 6.5 years. Willie moved to Dumfries 5 years ago, and now works with the NHS and is a member for Labour for Independence, which he joined about 6 months ago. I spoke to Willie on the phone the other day there, asked him for his little summary, and asked him why he was doing the talk, and his answer was, "I'm just an ordinary guy passionate about his country." Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for taking the time to come along and listen to us speak to you tonight. I'd like to start by saying that I am not accustomed to public speaking. In fact, the last time I did anything even similar to this was when I worked as a tour guide at Crookham Power Station during my summer holidays, and I can assure you, from looking at me, that wasn't yesterday. So I do hope you'll be gentle with me tonight. Now, as I said, I'm just an ordinary working class bloke, and I am, and always have been, very passionate about Scottish independence. And that is why I am determined to get myself really far out of my comfort zone and be standing here in front of you speaking tonight. Because I don't want to waken up on the 19th of September to a no vote and think to myself, you know, if I'd just done that little bit more. So I am heartened to see that the panel here reflects the true nature of the debate and that politicians are in the minority. Because this is a question for the people of Scotland and not just for our political classes. Now, while it is our political leaders who have asked the question of whether Scotland should return to being an independent country, it is for us, the people of Scotland, to answer yes or no. And I know which I would rather the answer to be. Now, I regularly find myself speaking with folk about the independence debate. And by far and away, the most regular thing I hear people saying to me is, "Oh, you know, I didn't really like that Alex Salmond. You know, I might vote yes if it wasn't for him." I would like to say here and now that this is not a vote of confidence in one man or a single party. This is a vote of confidence in our country. This is about Scotland retaking its place on the world stage. I was brought up in a working class family, and I was brought up to believe that the Labour Party was the party of the working classes. But over the last years, it's been to my utter dismay that I have watched as that's changed. The party has become more and more like the Tories as they both chase UKIP off to the right. The policies pursued by the Westminster parties do not reflect the values held by the vast majority of Scottish society. We witness attacks on the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society. We see the sick, the disabled, the unemployed, all punished to recoup the losses made by the richest and the most privileged in our society. The banking crisis was not caused by working people like you and I, so why should we have to pay for it? I personally find it obscene that bankers and fat cats can be paid 6- and 7-figure salaries and then be paid millions more in bonuses when they have brought their businesses, our country and the economy to their knees. Now, Labour for Independence, of whom I am a member, is a political organisation which seeks to give a voice to the pro-independence supporters of the Scottish Labour Party. I myself am not a member of the Labour Party, as I refuse to join a party which I feel no longer holds true to the values that I recognise as traditional Labour values. We in LFI believe that in an independent Scotland, a true, independent Labour Party can re-emerge. A party not beholden to the neoliberal, Thatcherite ways that have become enshrined in Westminster politics of late. Now, we in LFI will adhere to the founding principles of the Labour Party of fairness, equality and social justice. We believe that Scotland deserves and expects a party that represents these values and is directly accountable to the electorate of Scotland. Now, back in 1997, and after suffering under 18 years of Tory rule, we saw Scotland's industrial landscape destroyed and we saw communities decimated across this country. I finally saw a Labour Prime Minister walking into Downing Street, and I believed the hype. I believed the song. I genuinely thought things can only get better. But what did we get? We got Tory Blair. We got a Labour Party that was no longer recognisable as being a party of the working man. For 13 years they were in power, and they chose not to repeal any of the anti-trade union laws or to reinstate the rights of the working man to be treated with fairness and dignity. They chose not to reverse the privatisation of services that are essential to the public good, services like water, and power and transportation, and indeed they further introduced the free market into the National Health Service. I believe that the political system in this country is failing Scotland. Decisions that are made in Westminster are based primarily on meeting the needs of Middle England and the South East. Take, for example, the bedroom tax. This is legislation that was introduced to tackle the high costs of rent, primarily in London and the South East of England. When the Tories came to power, they extended this legislation to include social housing across the country. They did not take into account the fact that there is a dire shortage of one-bedroom homes. Excuse me. Or that they did not also take into account that many of the people affected are disabled people who require an extra bedroom for either carers or equipment. And that is before we even mention the complete and utter disregard for communities. People want to stay in the local communities. They want to stay where they have social ties and family support. But none of this seemed to matter. The only thing they seemed to care about was money. As I said, it's become increasingly difficult to differentiate between the parties at Westminster. Recently, George Osborne announced that should the Tories come to power, he will introduce a further £25 billion worth of cuts from public sector spending, with £12 billion of that coming from the welfare budget. Ed Balls has stated that should Labour come to power, he will follow these spending cuts. So regardless of who becomes the next government, austerity is guaranteed. However, they have no concerns when it comes to spending money in some other areas. Westminster politicians appear to be in agreement that in this time of austerity, they can prioritise even more money to replace Trident. Now, it's been estimated that the cost of Trident will be around £97 billion over the system's 30-year lifespan. Now, every year that that system is in place, Scotland's share of the costs will be around £250 million every year. Could that money not be spent in ways that benefit our society, rather than on weapons of mass murder that nobody's going to use anyway? I call them weapons of mass murder rather than weapons of mass destruction, because to me that's what they are. These are weapons that are designed to indiscriminately kill men, women and children on a massive scale. But for me, it's not just the money. It's about the morality of these things. We don't want them. We don't need them. In an independent, civilised Scotland, there is no place for nuclear weapons. Now, for the money that they plan to spend on replacing Trident, Scotland could benefit from all of these following things. We could have 5 hospitals, 100 doctors, 100 dentists, 10 secondary schools with 200 teachers. We could have 30 sports centres. We could pay for the hosting of the Commonwealth Games. We could dual the A9 from Perth to Inverness, and we could dual the A75 to Stranraer. Now, there are some that say that these are a deterrent. But a deterrent from whom? From North Korea? Let's be completely honest. Right now, North Korea couldn't deliver a pizza, let alone a 5-kiloton nuclear warhead. There are 225 nuclear warheads in the UK, and all of them are based in Scotland. Never have we been asked if we want these to be placed within 30 miles of our largest city, and yet that is where they sit. Now, Westminster has looked for an alternative base for them, and they did. They named Devonport on the south coast. But they then went on to say that it's too risky to put them there because of the population. And seriously, they think Glasgow's some daft wee village. Now, not content with that, they have also shortlisted Chapel Cross as a possible site for storing the contaminated waste from the decommissioning of the old Polaris submarine fleet. I would like to see a brighter, fairer and more just future for Scotland. We have what it takes to become a successful, independent country. And it's not just me that says that. All of the political leaders who are campaigning against independence say that we could make it on our own. But they just didn't think we should. They say that we're better together. They say the UK is okay. But you ask yourself, is okay good enough? Currently, we live in a country that until recently was rated by the OECD as the 4th most unequal country in the developed world. That position has changed. We are now the 3rd most unequal country. And that is not okay in my book. Yes, we do have a parliament, but it has only 16% of the powers available to any sovereign parliament around the world. But you take a look at what they've done with those powers and the pocket money budget handed to them by Westminster. The NHS is protected from privatisation. Prescription charges have been abolished. There are free bus passes made available to pensioners who have spent their life paying into this society. There has been a continuation of free personal care for the elderly. There is no tuition fees for Scottish students, and council tax bills have been frozen to protect budgets of families across the country. All of these things have been achieved with the limited powers and budgets since the inception of the Scottish Parliament. The No campaign are making vague promises about devolving more power to Holyrood. Now, we've heard this all before. I'm sure there are some of you in this room old enough to remember the promises of Jam tomorrow. But look what we got. We got Thatcher. Now imagine what we could do if we had all the powers of a sovereign parliament and all of the money raised in Scotland stayed in this country to benefit the whole of our society. We have the potential to be in the top 10 richest countries in the world. Within our boundaries lies 90% of the oil and gas reserves currently under Westminster control. Now this is an asset which is estimated to be worth £1.4 trillion over the next 50 years. I'd like you to take a second to think about that. Now, currently, we hear these big numbers all the time. We hear millions and billions and trillions, and they all sound so alike. £1.4 trillion is 1,400,000 million pounds. That is 12 zeros. Now, we also have 25% of the offshore wind, tidal and generating capacity for the whole of Europe. Our food and drinks industry is worth £8.7 billion every year, with Scotch whisky representing £4.6 billion. Incidentally, Scotch whisky exports represent 25% of all food and drink exports from the whole of the UK. And we have so much more. Now, while these things give us a chance to build a vibrant, successful and diverse economy, it is not them that give me hope that our society will prosper. What gives me the greatest hope for our future is that it is the determination and the ingenuity of the Scottish people who will build, mould and shape the kind of society that nurtures and encourages its citizens on to greatest things and doesn't punish and berate them for having the temerity to be poor, sick and powerless. This September, we have a choice of what kind of future we and our children will face. We must choose between hope and prosperity, or fear and austerity. Thank you very much.
Could I just say, for the first time speaking to a public audience. I take my hat off to you.
I've practiced enough today.
Right. Can I have a question, please? Again, right?
How would you tackle curbing what admittedly are obscene levels of top executive pay, but at the same time encourage businesses to move to Scotland and bring jobs?
I'm not a politician. I really don't know how to answer that, I'm afraid. But I think some kind of socialism can work. You can bring people in. Yeah. I'm going to be absolutely honest. I don't know enough about business. I've never had a business. I've never done. I'm just a working class bloke. You know, I'm just an ordinary working class bloke. I don't know anything about business or how these sort of things work. So I'm sorry. I can't answer that question. And to try to would be wrong, because I would be able to be giving you completely the wrong information. I am sorry about that.
Okay. Anybody else? Gentleman at the back, we're slightly in front. Sorry?
What do you do with the flat cut with the big salaries you wrote?
Regulation. Yes. Like proper regulation of the financial services, things that the Labour government didn't do because they were too busy jumping into bed with these companies. They were too busy trying to please them. Right. Proper regulation. I think kind of what Ash was speaking about, you know, that kind of the companies having a structure that stops the executives just awarding themselves. I mean, it's turkeys and voting for Christmas. You know, it's that kind of thing. They're not going to give themselves small pay rises. They're not going to give themselves small bonuses. But if they have someone that they have to be beholden to by properly being regulated, then that would be the way to do it. Once we've got a yes vote, then we can decide what kind of society we build. My idea would be for us to have a socialist society, a society that works for the benefit of everyone within that society, not just for the ones at the top and leaving everyone else behind, but one that works for the benefit of everybody.